one night of love with the Apache, but he came back to claim her heart years later. Western. The wooden buildings, lined up along the main street, seemed almost to glow in the late afternoon. Clara stood near the fence of her family's ranch, wiping the sweat from her brow. The past few weeks had been hard. The drought had made the cattle thin, and her father's sudden passing left her with the responsibility of running the ranch alone. At just 22, she was determined, but sometimes the weight of it all felt heavier than she could bear. Clara loved this land more than anything. She loved the endless sky, the smell of wildflowers in spring, the sound of the wind rustling through the tall grass. But sometimes she wished for a companion, someone who could understand the loneliness that came with responsibility. Her mother had passed years ago, leaving her father and then eventually Clara to manage the ranch. Now, she rose before the sun and worked long after it disappeared, her only company the occasional neighbor or traveling trader who passed through town. That day, Clara was rounding up a few of the stray cattle that had wandered too far. She guided them with a gentle voice, herding them toward the corral. Suddenly, a loud commotion echoed from the edge of the woods that bordered the ranch. Clara stiffened, her heart racing. Bandits or wild animals often strayed close to the ranch, and she knew she had to be careful. Without thinking twice, she grabbed a long stick for protection and slowly approached the sound. As she drew closer, she saw a figure struggling against a group of horses. At first, she thought it was one of the ranch hands from a neighboring property, but as she got nearer, she realized it was a man she had never seen before. He was tall, with dark hair tied back in a loose braid, wearing clothes that seemed simple yet elegant in their own way. There was something about him, his calm yet strong presence, the way his eyes scanned the situation carefully, that made Clara pause. The man was struggling to calm a frightened horse that had bolted from the herd. The horse reared up, kicking wildly, and Clara could see the danger. Without thinking, she shouted, "Watch out!" The man turned, their eyes meeting for the first time. For a moment, neither spoke. There was a spark, an unspoken understanding, as if they both knew that this moment would change everything. Then, with a swift motion, the man managed to calm the horse, using gentle words and careful movements. Clara was impressed. She had handled many things on the ranch, but this man had a way with animals that seemed almost magical. "Are you hurt?" she asked, stepping closer, though careful not to startle him or the horse. "I'm fine," he said, his voice deep and steady. "Just a bit of a scuffle." "These horses, they can be unpredictable," Clara nodded. "I know, they've got me in trouble more times than I can count. My name is Clara." He looked at her, a faint smile on his lips. "Takoda," he said simply. There was a weight to the name, a sense of history and strength that made Clara curious. "Takoda," she repeated softly, almost tasting the word. "Are you passing through town?" "No," he said, shaking his head. "I was traveling near the plains when I heard your herd. I thought I might be able to help." Clara noticed how carefully he spoke, choosing each word as if measuring its meaning. There was a quiet confidence in him, a way of carrying himself that made people pay attention without him demanding it. She felt an unusual pull toward him, a mix of curiosity and admiration. The afternoon passed quickly as they worked together to round up the remaining cattle. Clara found herself talking to him more than she had expected. Takoda listened attentively, occasionally offering advice or helping her anticipate the animal's movements. Though she tried to focus on her work, she couldn't help stealing glances at him, noticing the way the sunlight caught his dark hair and the kindness in his eyes. As the sun began to sink behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, Clara felt a strange hesitation. She knew the day was ending, and with it, the fleeting chance to know this man who had suddenly entered her life. "You should rest," she said softly. "You must be tired from traveling." Takoda shook his head. "I will stay a little longer," he said, his eyes meeting hers. "There is something about this place, it feels like I was meant to be here today." Clara's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure what he meant, but there was a sincerity in his words that made her trust him instantly. For a moment, they simply stood together, watching the sky change colors, the world around them quiet except for the distant calls of birds returning to their nests. As night fell, Clara invited Takoda to her small cabin near the ranch. It was modest, with a fireplace and a few simple furnishings, but it was warm and welcoming. They shared a simple meal of bread, cheese, and stew, talking about life, the land, and their dreams. Clara learned that Takoda was not just skilled with animals, but had a deep knowledge of the land and its history. He spoke of rivers, mountains, and forests with reverence, and Clara felt as if she were discovering her own home anew through his eyes. There was a comfortable silence that fell between them at times, moments when words were unnecessary. Clara felt a connection she had never experienced before. She realized how rare it was to meet someone who could understand her without judgment, someone who could see her strength and vulnerability at the same time. As the fire burned low, Takoda stood and walked to the window, gazing at the stars above. "The world is vast," he said quietly, "but sometimes it brings people together in the most unexpected ways." Clara nodded, feeling the truth of his words deep in her heart. She had always believed in hard work and self-reliance, but something about this man made her yearn for companionship, for someone who could share her joys and burdens. Before leaving that night, Takoda turned to her. "Clara, I don't know what tomorrow will bring. I only know that meeting you today, it has changed me." Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of excitement and fear. "It has changed me too," she admitted softly. He smiled, a gentle, reassuring smile, and tipped his head. "Then we shall see where the path leads." With that, he left her cabin, disappearing into the night as silently as he had arrived. Clara watched him go, a mixture of sadness and hope filling her heart. She knew she might never see him again, yet something told her that this encounter was only the beginning of a story much larger than either of them could imagine. That night, Clara lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the day in her mind. She thought about Takoda, the way he had moved, the kindness in his eyes, the way he had seemed to understand her without words. She felt an unfamiliar emotion stir in her chest, one that whispered of possibilities she had never dared to consider before. Sleep came slowly, and when it finally did, it brought dreams of wide-open plains, endless skies, and a man who had come into her life like a sudden gust of wind, unexpected, powerful, and unforgettable. The next morning, Clara woke with the sun streaming through the window. The ranch awaited her, the cattle still needing care, but a part of her heart lingered on the events of the previous day. She worked with renewed energy, carrying with her the memory of Takoda's presence and a secret hope that destiny would bring him back to her. Though the town was unaware of the encounter, the memory of that one day would linger in Clara's heart forever. It was a day that marked the beginning of a connection neither time nor distance could easily break, a day that would shape the course of her life in ways she could not yet understand. And so, with the plain stretching endlessly before her and the wind whispering through the tall grass, Clara continued her work, unaware that fate had already begun weaving a story of love, courage, and destiny that would return to her when she least expected it. The evening fell quietly over Silver Creek, and the soft glow of the setting sun painted the sky in warm shades of orange and pink. Clara finished her chores for the day, her heart still echoing with the memory of Takoda's visit. She tried to focus on the cattle and the stable, but her thoughts kept drifting back to him. There was something about the way he moved, the calm strength in his presence, and the gentleness in his eyes that stayed with her like the last warmth of sunlight on her skin. That night, the wind carried a fresh scent of wildflowers and grass across the plains, and Clara felt a strange mix of excitement and nervousness. She had never felt such a connection with anyone before. Something deep inside told her that Takoda's arrival was more than a simple encounter. It felt like fate. She sat near the window of her cabin, watching the stars twinkle in the clear night sky, wondering where he was and if he was thinking of her too. As if the night itself had answered her thoughts, she heard soft footsteps approaching the cabin. Her heart skipped a beat. She opened the door slowly, and there he was, Takoda, standing in the moonlight, his figure calm and composed, yet carrying an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "Clara," he said softly, as if speaking her name aloud brought comfort to them both. "May I come in?" Clara stepped aside, feeling a flutter of anticipation. "Of course," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. The cabin felt smaller somehow, warmer, as if it had been waiting for this moment. They sat by the fire, the flames casting dancing shadows across the walls. They spoke of many things: the ranch, the land, the quiet beauty of the plains. But soon, their conversation drifted to more personal stories, to memories and hopes they had never shared with anyone else. Clara found herself telling Takoda about her father, the ranch, and the dreams she held close to her heart. In turn, Takoda spoke of his life traveling through the lands, of his people, and the respect he held for the natural world. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a connection that did not need words. The silence between their conversations was comfortable, almost comforting, like a shared secret. Clara noticed how carefully Takoda watched her, how attentive he was to her words, how much care he took in simply being present. In that quiet room, filled only with the crackling of the fire, Clara felt seen in a way she had never experienced before. As the night deepened, Takoda stood and walked to the window, gazing at the vast expanse of the plains under the starlit sky. "The land speaks to those who listen," he said softly. "It tells stories of courage, love, and patience. I have listened today, and it has told me something very special." Clara felt her heart race. "And what did it tell you?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. Takoda turned to her, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "It told me that some meetings are meant to change the course of our lives, that even a single day, a single moment, can leave a mark on our hearts forever." Clara's breath caught. She had felt it too, the pull, the unexplainable bond that had formed between them so quickly. For a moment they simply looked at each other, the silence heavy with meaning, the air around them charged with unspoken emotion. Then, slowly, Takoda stepped closer, and Clara did not move away. Instead, she felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation. The firelight flickered over his face, highlighting the strength in his jaw, the softness in his eyes. Clara realized she was standing on the edge of something she had never known, a connection so powerful it frightened and thrilled her at the same time. Without a word, Takoda reached for her hand. It was a gentle, careful gesture, full of respect and care. Clara's fingers trembled slightly as she allowed him to take her hand in his. The simple touch sent a shiver through her body, a spark that seemed to travel through every nerve. "Clara," he said softly, "I feel as though I have known you longer than a single day. There is a bond between us that cannot be explained." Clara nodded, unable to find her voice. She felt the truth of his words deep within her, a truth that seemed to echo in her very soul. They moved closer, drawn by an invisible force neither of them could resist. The room seemed to disappear around them, leaving only the two of them and the quiet music of the night outside. Takoda leaned gently toward her, and Clara closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of his presence. The world faded, leaving only the soft rhythm of their hearts, the quiet whispers of the wind outside, and the sense that this night was a turning point in both their lives. They spent hours talking, laughing softly and sharing stories of their pasts, of the places they had been, and the dreams they still carried. In each other's company, they discovered a sense of understanding, a feeling of being completely known and accepted. The barriers they had carried, fear, hesitation, loneliness, seemed to melt away in the warmth of their connection. As the night grew late, Takoda suggested they step outside, away from the small cabin, to stand under the stars. The cool night air greeted them as they walked hand in hand across the soft grass, the plains stretching endlessly around them. The sky above was filled with millions of stars, and the moon cast a silver glow on the land. Clara felt a sense of freedom she had never known. Here, with Takoda beside her, the worries of the ranch, the responsibilities, and the hardships seemed to vanish. For the first time in her life, she allowed herself to simply be, to feel, to embrace the present moment without hesitation or fear. They found a quiet spot near a small hill, and for a long time they simply stood together, watching the stars. Takoda gently brushed a strand of hair from Clara's face, and she felt her heart swell with emotion. In that simple gesture there was tenderness, care, and a promise of something deeper, a connection that went beyond words. "Clara," Takoda whispered, "this night, it may be only one night, but it will stay with me forever. I will carry it in my heart always." Clara felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "I feel the same," she said softly. "I don't know what the future holds, but I know this: I will never forget tonight." The hours passed like minutes, and the night air grew cooler. They finally returned to the cabin, but the warmth between them lingered. Sitting close by the fire once more, they shared quiet laughter, soft conversation, and a sense of companionship that felt timeless. Clara realized that she had never felt so safe, so understood, so connected to another human being. When sleep finally came, it was with the comfort of knowing that their hearts had found a rare bond, one that distance, time, or circumstance could not easily break. Clara drifted off under the soft blanket, the memory of Takoda's presence etched into her mind. The wind outside whispered through the plains, carrying the promise of new beginnings and a love that had taken root in the quiet of the night. By dawn, Takoda was gone. Clara awoke to the first light of morning, alone in the cabin. She felt a pang of sadness, but also a deep, quiet joy. The night had been real, every moment of connection, every shared laugh, every gentle touch. And though he had vanished, she knew their hearts were linked in a way that distance could not sever. Clara rose and looked out across the plains, the memory of the night still fresh in her mind. She felt a new strength within her, a sense of hope and excitement for what the future might hold. The world was vast, full of uncertainty, but one thing was clear. She had experienced something extraordinary, a love that had arrived like a sudden gust of wind and left a mark that would remain forever. As she tended to her chores that morning, Clara found herself smiling more often, her movements lighter, her heart fuller. Though Takoda had left, the bond they shared that night would guide her, comfort her, and inspire her in ways she could not yet fully understand. And somewhere, out on the plains, she imagined Takoda thinking of her too, carrying the memory of their night together as a quiet treasure, a connection that time would not erase. And so, the night of wonder, connection, and unspoken promises became a secret held in both their hearts, a night that would shape their futures, a night that would one day call them back to each other, no matter how many years passed. 5 years had passed since that magical night. On the plains, the seasons had come and gone, bringing both hardships and blessings, but the memory of Takoda remained as vivid in Clara's heart as the first day they had met. Silver Creek had grown slowly, the town adding a few more buildings, a small schoolhouse, and a modest general store. Clara had grown too, older, stronger, and wiser, her hands calloused from years of working the ranch, her mind sharper from the challenges of managing her family's land alone. Though life was busy and demanding, Clara often found herself thinking about Takoda. Sometimes it was a fleeting thought, a whisper of memory when she was alone in the corral, brushing the cattle. Other times it was a vivid recollection, his calm strength, his gentle eyes, the way he had spoken her name with such care. She tried to tell herself that it was a memory best left in the past, that life went on, and the world had no space for fleeting moments of passion. But deep down, she knew that night had changed her, had planted a seed of longing and hope she could not ignore. The ranch had become her life, and she poured herself into it with dedication. She rose before sunrise, her feet finding the worn paths of the property almost by habit. She mended fences, tended the fields, fed the animals, and ensured the cattle were healthy. People from the town sometimes came to her for advice or to buy supplies, and Clara had earned their respect. They admired her skill, her independence, and her courage. Yet for all the admiration and accomplishments, Clara often felt a quiet emptiness, a longing for something she could not quite name. Clara's friends occasionally teased her about her solitary life, suggesting that she should marry or find someone to share the ranch with. But Clara always brushed off their suggestions. "I have work to do," she would say with a smile, though in her heart, she wondered if it was more than just work that kept her focused. She thought about Takoda often, though she had no way of knowing where he was or if he even remembered her. The thought of him lingering somewhere out on the plains, living his life without her, both comforted and pained her. One late afternoon, as Clara rode along the northern edge of the ranch, she noticed the wind shifting in a strange way. The plains stretched endlessly before her, the tall grass swaying gently under the breeze. She stopped her horse and listened, feeling a sense of anticipation she could not explain. For a moment, she thought she saw a figure in the distance, moving among the trees. She blinked, shaking her head. It was probably just her imagination. Even so, she felt a stir of hope, a tiny spark that refused to be extinguished. Clara dismounted and let her horse graze, standing alone on the edge of the plains, the wind teasing her hair. She thought of Takoda, of that single night when everything had felt possible, and wondered if destiny would ever bring him back. She sighed softly, a mix of longing and acceptance. Life had moved forward, yet some part of her heart had remained frozen in that one perfect night. The years had not dulled her memory of Takoda. She remembered the way he had spoken about the land, the stars, and the quiet truths of life. She remembered the tenderness in his touch and the way he had listened to her with such care. Those memories were her secret treasures, hidden deep within her heart. They were both a comfort and a reminder of something she could not have, at least not yet. During these years, Clara had also grown closer to her neighbors and townspeople. She helped with their problems, guided younger ranchers, and shared her knowledge of the land. But even in her happiest moments, there was a quiet longing for the one person who had left the deepest impression on her life. She often walked by the spot where they had first stood under the stars, imagining him there beside her, his presence calm and reassuring. Sometimes, when the night was particularly clear, Clara would gaze at the stars and whisper his name softly into the wind, hoping it might reach him wherever he was. She did not know if he thought of her, if he remembered her, or if he had found someone else. But even in uncertainty, she held on to a sense of hope, believing that the connection they had formed was strong enough to endure the distance and the years. Clara's days were filled with routine, but her nights were filled with memories. She sometimes woke up thinking she felt him nearby, his calm presence lingering like a shadow in the corners of her room. She would close her eyes and imagine the warmth of his hand, the strength of his voice, and the way he had looked at her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. Those moments were fleeting, yet they sustained her through the hardest days. One evening, after a long day of work, Clara sat on the porch of her cabin, her hands busy with mending a piece of clothing, her mind wandering. The plains stretched endlessly before her, bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. The wind carried the familiar scents of grass and earth, and Clara felt a strange stirring in her chest, a mix of hope, longing, and anticipation. She thought of Takoda and wondered if he had ever thought of her, if he had ever recalled the night they had spent together. She felt a sudden ache of loneliness, not for want of companionship, but for the connection she had experienced with him, a connection that had felt real, deep, and enduring. Clara knew that life would go on, that she could continue to thrive without him, but a small part of her could not help dreaming of his return. Over the next few weeks, Clara found herself more reflective than usual. She spent time walking the plains alone, letting her thoughts drift freely, imagining conversations with Takoda, recalling his gentle words, his calm presence, and the sense of understanding that had filled that one night. She wondered if destiny would ever bring them together again, and though she tried to focus on her work, she could not ignore the quiet longing that had taken root in her heart. One day, a traveling trader arrived in Silver Creek, bringing news from other towns. Clara greeted him politely, exchanging pleasantries, when she overheard a conversation about a man traveling through the plains, a man who had been helping the Apache tribes with various tasks, moving from one area to another. She froze, her heart racing. The trader described the man briefly, mentioning his skill with animals, his knowledge of the land, and his quiet, respectful manner. Clara's breath caught. Could it be? For days afterward, Clara could not stop thinking about the possibility. She rode along the northern hills, scanning the plains for any sign of him. Each breeze, each distant figure stirred a mixture of hope and fear within her. What if he had changed? What if he did not remember her? And yet, despite the uncertainty, a part of her could not stop believing that their paths would cross again. In those years of separation, Clara had grown stronger, more independent, and more confident in her abilities. She had learned to face challenges alone, to make difficult decisions, and to take pride in her accomplishments. But even with all her growth, she knew there was a missing piece, a part of her heart that remained tied to the memory of Takoda, the man who had arrived one night and changed her life forever. And so, life continued in Silver Creek. The ranch thrived under Clara's care, the town grew slowly but steadily, and the plains stretched endlessly beyond the horizon. Yet in the quiet moments, when the wind whispered through the grass and the stars shone brightly in the night sky, Clara would close her eyes and feel his presence, imagining the moment when fate would finally bring them together once more. Though the years of separation had been long and filled with hard work, Clara carried the memory of Takoda with her, a gentle flame that refused to fade. She had learned patience, resilience, and the power of hope. And somewhere, deep in her heart, she believed that the man who had touched her soul on a single night would one day return, not as a memory, but as a living, breathing part of her world once more. And so, the story of Clara continued, shaped by the land she loved, the people she cared for, and the memory of a love that had arrived quietly, yet left a mark that would last a lifetime. The plains were vast and life was unpredictable, but Clara knew one truth above all. Some connections, no matter how brief, were strong enough to survive time, distance, and circumstance, waiting for the moment when destiny would reunite them. It had been 5 long years since Clara had last seen Takoda, yet the memory of that night under the stars never faded. She had grown used to the rhythms of her life, tending the ranch, guiding the cattle, and watching over Silver Creek. But her heart always carried a quiet ache, a longing that refused to disappear. She had accepted that perhaps Takoda was only a beautiful memory, a fleeting moment in time meant to be cherished but never repeated. One bright morning, Clara was busy repairing a broken fence near the edge of the northern pasture. The sun was warm on her back and a gentle breeze rustled the tall grass around her. She paused for a moment, wiping the sweat from her brow and scanning the horizon. Something felt different that day. The wind seemed sharper, carrying a strange scent she could not place. The horses stirred nervously, their ears pricked toward the distant tree line. Clara's heart skipped, though she tried to tell herself it was just her imagination. Then she saw him. A lone figure appeared on the horizon, walking steadily toward the ranch. At first she thought her eyes were playing tricks on her, but as he drew closer, her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her chest. It was him, Takoda. Older, taller, with a presence that had grown even stronger over the years, yet still carrying that calm, reassuring aura she remembered so well. Time seemed to stand still. Clara dropped the fence post she was holding and ran toward the edge of the pasture, her heart in her throat. The wind carried his name to her lips before she even realized it. Takoda, she called, her voice trembling with a mixture of disbelief and joy. Takoda stopped and looked toward her, his eyes widening with recognition. A slow, warm smile spread across his face. Clara, he said softly, almost reverently, as if speaking her name aloud made the world right again. I promised I would return, and here I am. Clara ran the last few steps, her arms outstretched, and he met her halfway. They embraced, not as strangers, but as two souls who had been waiting for this reunion for years. The connection that had begun on that night long ago was still there, stronger, deeper, and more certain than ever. When they finally pulled back, they studied each other's faces. Time had changed them both. Takoda had the marks of his journeys, sun-kissed skin, weathered hands, and a quiet strength that came from experience. Clara had grown more confident, her eyes reflecting determination and wisdom, yet the softness in her gaze was reserved for him. I can hardly believe you're here, Clara whispered, her voice catching. After all this time. Takoda took her hands in his, holding them gently. I never forgot you, Clara, not for a single day. Life called me elsewhere, but my heart remained with you. Every decision I made, every path I walked, I hoped it would lead me back to this moment. Tears sprang to Clara's eyes, and she nodded, unable to speak. Words seemed too small to express the flood of emotions within her. The wind swirled around them, carrying the scents of the plains and the memories of that one night years ago. It was as if the world had paused, waiting for their reunion to unfold. Over the next few hours, they walked across the ranch together, speaking of the years they had been apart. Takoda told Clara of his journeys, of the people he had met, the lands he had traveled, and the lessons he had learned. Clara shared her own experiences, how she had kept the ranch running, how she had grown stronger, and how she had survived the challenges life had thrown her way. As they talked, Clara realized that the bond between them had not weakened. If anything, it had grown. Time and distance had only made their connection more precious. They laughed at memories of that first meeting, at the awkwardness of their early conversations, and at the thrill of that one night under the stars. And yet beneath the laughter, there was a quiet acknowledgement of the love that had never faded. Evening approached, and the sun dipped low over the plains, painting the sky with brilliant shades of orange and pink. Clara and Takoda found themselves sitting together on a small hill, the same place where they had first stood under the stars years ago. The air was warm, carrying the gentle scent of wildflowers and grass, and for a moment they simply sat, watching the world in silence. Takoda spoke softly. I have thought of you every day, Clara. I have wondered if you remembered me, if you still thought of that night as I have. Clara's heart swelled. I have remembered you every day, she admitted. I thought of you in quiet moments in the work I did and when I looked at the stars. You never left my heart. They shared a long, quiet moment, letting the emotions settle between them. Then, as the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Takoda gently took Clara's hand. I have come back to claim my place in your life, Clara. If you will have me, I want to be by your side, not just as a memory, but as your partner, your companion, your equal. Clara felt tears fill her eyes, a mixture of joy, relief, and love that she had longed to express for years. She squeezed his hand tightly, a radiant smile spreading across her face. I've been waiting for this moment, she whispered. I want the same, Takoda. I've always wanted the same. The townspeople had noticed the reunion from a distance. Some whispered, some stared in curiosity, but Clara paid them no mind. This moment was hers and Takoda's, a culmination of years of longing, hope, and patience. It was a love that had endured time, distance, and uncertainty, and now it was real, tangible, and undeniable. Over the next few days, Takoda helped Clara on the ranch. Together, they rode across the plains, tending to the cattle, repairing fences, and working side by side. Their laughter echoed across the open fields, and their connection grew even stronger with each passing day. The land that had once been a place of solitude for Clara now felt alive with companionship, love, and shared purpose. At night, they would sit by the fire, talking about dreams for the future, sharing stories of the past, and simply enjoying the comfort of being together. Clara realized that the years of waiting had only made their love more meaningful. It was not just the excitement of reunion. It was the deep understanding, trust, and respect that had grown between them, a love built to last. One evening, as they sat on the hill watching the stars, Takoda spoke softly. "The world is vast, Clara, and life is unpredictable. But some things are certain: my love for you, my respect for you, and my promise to always stand by your side." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady strength of his presence. "And I will stand by yours," she replied. "Through every challenge, every joy, and every quiet moment in between, we will face the world together." The wind carried their words across the plains, and for the first time in years, Clara felt a sense of peace she had never known. The love that had begun with a single night under the stars had returned, stronger, more enduring, and more beautiful than she could have imagined. In the days that followed, Silver Creek slowly began to accept Takoda's presence. People noticed the change in Clara, the joy in her eyes, the lightness in her step, and the warmth in her smile. They saw the partnership between her and Takoda, the respect and love they shared, and gradually the town came to understand that this was a bond that could not be denied or ignored. Clara realized that love was not just about passion or excitement. It was about trust, respect, and patience. She had waited for years, and now that Takoda had returned, she cherished every moment, knowing that their reunion was not a fleeting chance, but the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. As they walked together across the plains one evening, Clara felt the wind brush against her face, carrying the scents of grass and earth. She looked at Takoda, his eyes reflecting the fading light of the sun, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. Life had been challenging, full of uncertainty, but love had found its way back to her. And now, with Takoda by her side, she knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together, stronger, wiser, and deeply connected. The night settled over the ranch, calm and quiet, with stars shining brightly above. Clara and Takoda sat together on the porch, their hands intertwined, sharing the comfort of silence and the promise of tomorrow. The plains stretched endlessly before them, but they knew they no longer faced them alone. Together, they had found the love that had waited patiently for years, and now it would guide them through every challenge, every joy, and every quiet moment that life would bring. The sun rose slowly over Silver Creek, casting golden rays across the plains. Clara stood on the porch of her cabin, gazing at the horizon, feeling a sense of peace she had not known in years. Beside her, Takoda was already up, tending to the horses and cattle with quiet efficiency, his presence calm and steady. The reunion of the past weeks had brought them closer than ever, but today felt different. It felt as if the world itself had aligned to celebrate their love. Life on the ranch had returned to its rhythm, yet now every moment was filled with joy. Clara had long accepted that the love she had once feared might be lost had returned, stronger and more enduring. The townspeople had begun to notice the change in her demeanor. There was a light in her eyes that had been missing, a softness in her smile, and a quiet confidence that came from knowing her heart was finally complete. Takoda worked silently beside her, guiding the horses into the stable and checking the fences along the northern pasture. Clara watched him, her heart swelling with admiration and love. In the years they had been apart, he had grown wiser, stronger, and even more grounded. Yet, despite the passage of time, he remained the same gentle soul who had captured her heart on that unforgettable night. As the morning wore on, Clara prepared breakfast, the aroma of fresh bread and coffee filling the cabin. Takoda joined her, carrying a basket of fresh eggs from the henhouse. They worked together effortlessly, a seamless team, moving through the chores with the ease that comes from deep understanding and mutual respect. There was a harmony between them that made even the simplest tasks feel special. After breakfast, they rode out across the plains, surveying the ranch and checking on the cattle. The wind carried the scent of grass and wildflowers, and the distant mountains glowed in the morning light. Clara felt a profound sense of gratitude. She had endured hardships, loneliness, and uncertainty, but love had returned to her life, and with it came a sense of fulfillment she had longed for. As they rode, Takoda spoke softly. "Clara, I have traveled far and seen many lands, but none compare to this. None compare to the peace and joy I feel here with you. The world is vast, but this, us, is everything I need." Clara smiled, her eyes reflecting the morning sun. "I feel the same, Takoda. These years apart were hard, but they taught me patience, strength, and hope. And now that you are here, I feel complete." They reached the edge of a small hill overlooking the plains, a place they had discovered together years ago. Takoda stopped his horse and dismounted, holding out his hand to Clara. She took it, and together they stood in silence, watching the endless expanse of land stretching out before them. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying with it a sense of promise and new beginnings. Takoda spoke softly, his voice filled with emotion. "Clara, I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to build a future together, facing every challenge and every joy side by side. Will you walk this path with me?" Clara felt tears of happiness fill her eyes. "Yes, Takoda," she whispered. "I have waited for this moment for years. I want to spend my life with you, facing everything together." They embraced, the plains around them silent witnesses to the love that had endured years of separation, doubt, and longing. In that embrace, they felt a sense of completion, as if the world itself had conspired to bring them together. Over the following weeks, Clara and Takoda worked tirelessly to prepare the ranch for the coming seasons, their partnership stronger than ever. They shared not only the physical work, but also the emotional support that comes from knowing someone will always be by your side. Every evening, they sat by the fire, talking about dreams, sharing stories, and planning a future that now felt tangible and secure. The townspeople began to see the strength of their bond. Some who had once whispered doubts now watched with admiration. Clara's friends noticed the change in her, the glow of happiness, the calm confidence, and the undeniable love she shared with Takoda. Even the skeptical neighbors began to accept that this was a love built on respect, patience, and shared experience. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Clara and Takoda walked together to the top of the hill where they had first stood under the stars. The plains stretched endlessly around them, the wind carrying the familiar scent of grass and wildflowers. They sat together in silence, letting the moment settle around them. Takoda took Clara's hand, holding it gently. "These plains, this land, it has been part of our story from the very beginning. I want to spend every sunrise and sunset here with you, building our life together." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the warmth and strength of his presence. "And I will, Takoda. We will face everything together, hardship, joy, and quiet moments just like this. I can't imagine my life without you now." The night settled over the ranch, the stars twinkling above like silent witnesses to their love. They walked back to the cabin, hand in hand, their hearts light and full. That night, for the first time in years, Clara slept without the ache of longing, without the shadow of uncertainty. She knew that Takoda was truly home, not just on the plains but in her heart. In the days that followed, they continued their work, their partnership seamless and natural. The ranch thrived under their combined care, and Clara found joy not only in the land but in the shared life she and Takoda were building. Every morning brought new hope, every evening a quiet reflection of gratitude. One afternoon, they sat together by the creek that ran along the edge of the property. Takoda skipped a stone across the water, and Clara laughed, the sound carrying across the plains. They shared a simple meal on the bank, enjoying the warmth of the sun and the gentle murmur of the water. Clara spoke softly. "I never thought life could feel this full, this complete. I thought I would always carry the memory of you as a quiet longing, but now," she smiled, her eyes shining, "now it feels real and it feels forever." Takoda smiled back, his hand brushing hers. "It is real, Clara. And it will last as long as we care for it, nurture it, and face life together. Love is not just a moment. It is every day, every choice, every shared experience. And I promise to spend every day proving that to you." As the seasons changed, their love only grew deeper. Spring brought new life to the ranch. Summer filled the plains with golden sunlight. Autumn painted the hills with warm hues, and winter brought quiet nights by the fire. Through every season, Clara and Takoda faced challenges together: stormy weather, stubborn cattle, and the hard work of ranch life. But they faced each one with strength, patience, and the unwavering bond they had rekindled. The townspeople slowly came to see the depth of their connection. Children waved as they rode past, neighbors offered help and support, and even those who had once doubted the union could no longer ignore the strength of their partnership. Clara and Takoda had built something rare and beautiful, a love that was not just passionate, but enduring, resilient, and rooted in respect and shared experience. One quiet evening, as the sun set behind the distant hills, Clara and Takoda stood together on the porch of their cabin. The plains stretched endlessly before them, bathed in the warm glow of the fading light. Clara rested her head on Takoda's shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart. "Takoda," she said softly, "this life we've built, it's everything I've ever wanted. You've brought love, hope, and strength back into my life. I can't imagine a day without you." Takoda kissed the top of her head gently. "And I can't imagine a day without you, Clara. Our love has endured years, distance, and uncertainty, and now it will guide us through everything ahead. We will face life together, and nothing can change that." As the stars began to appear in the night sky, Clara and Takoda sat together, watching the heavens and feeling the warmth of their shared love. The plains were quiet, the ranch peaceful, and the future bright. They had waited, hoped, and endured, and now they had found each other fully, completely, and forever. In that moment, Clara realized that love is not just about passion or fleeting moments. It is about patience, understanding, respect, and the courage to face life together. She had waited for years, and the wait had been worth every moment. The love she shared with Takoda was rare, enduring, and unshakable. And as they watched the stars twinkle above, they knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them side by side, their hearts forever entwined. And so, under the endless sky of Silver Creek, Clara and Takoda embraced the life they had longed for. Their love, tested by time and distance, had returned stronger than ever, a beacon of hope, patience, and devotion. The plain stretched before them, wide and free, just like the love that now filled their hearts, a love that would endure every season, every challenge, and every quiet moment for the rest of their days.